Yeah. You gotta work. You gotta work, grind, shine, it's mine. Gotta show everybody it's my time. Getting here, you gotta work, grind, shine. Never mind who talking down, cause they lying. Don't talk, you gotta work.
Let the conversation begin. This is Let's Talk with your host, Carl Lee.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Lee with Let's Talk, and today we have an interesting show. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting show. We've been here before, but now we at least have some facts behind, I think, about where some of it got started, maybe reasons for it, and those types of things. So we're gonna try to discuss. So Hollis Lewis is my co-host.
Hello.
And he's always here. You know, he loves to be opposite of me. So, and then we have Senator Tarr.
Hello.
And tell us all the good stuff about us. I like everybody to get their chance to give a good introduction, to tell us all the good stuff that you're doing, all that kind of stuff, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, absolutely. So I chair the Committee on Finance for the State Senate in West Virginia. And aside from that, that's our part-time legislative job. Then I'm also a family man, so I've been married for 30-some years now, and 3 kids, and own several businesses that in physical therapy and in gyms and those type of things, retail. And while I'm up here at the legislature, I'm working to help get the economy booming again in West Virginia. We've been seeing that start to happen, so that's a major role I play up here is around the economic development and finance policy. So.
Okay, and I think that there's been this whole new change of transfers out of high schools, going to different high schools and those kinds of things. We've had this conversation on the show several times, but we've never had anybody who's kind of actually that sits in your seat and has a strong voice toward it.
Well, we had Delicate Pence.
Well, yes, we did. Yes. I am the epitome of the other side of it. Like, okay. I feel like I just have the loyalty to my schools and the places that I go. And it's hard for me to break that and say, oh, it's okay to go somewhere else. Hollis has a kind of an in-between. So Hollis, give him a little bit of where you are so he's comfortable in where.
I initially started kind of when I heard about the transfer. I was all for it. I'm a product of transfer, if you want to call it that. I was at local schools here in Charleston, and then we had junior highs back then. But from 9th grade, and then I went to high school at GW. So it's kind of one of those middle school to high school transfers. So I was all for it. However, I think I've come back sort of to the middle of it, and I'm trying to find sort of a solution, a moderate solution that's going to still allow some flexibility, but just kind of tame the wild, wild west, if you will, because I think that's where we've gotten to, particularly like with the multiple transfer situation where kids are going from, out of district from middle school, going to a high school, then transferring to a high school, then going back to the home school. I think that's kind of, what's happening now. So I'm trying to find a middle ground. I'm similar to Governor Justice in his State of the State, where he definitely identified a problem. I don't know if either he or I found the solution.
Well, and the solution is what we started with, and it wasn't just this. This is a broader topic around school choice in general in West Virginia. And so back probably 2-3 years ago, we really got aggressive on providing school choice in West Virginia. And part of the reason is because our public schools were having poor and poorer performance, and what was happening there is that potentially is also affecting a population driver and affecting the success of our students, obviously. So we looked at it on 2 fronts. Is one, that we need a competitive nature within schools, period. So it gets to your middle ground and where you are too, is because we have some things you see right now just not even close to competitive, what you're seeing with sports this year.
Right.
But we've seen not close to competitive in years past when they go through cycles too in West Virginia history. But what we're looking for is at a global level is how do you incentivize a school to create a culture and create an environment where a parent wants their kid in your school, not just for sports, but academically or sports, either one or both. And so the concept around getting to the transfer rule really started beginning with giving a parent a say in the success of their child and what their child's life is, instead of government going in and saying, this is what you're going to do.
Okay.
And let me jump in, and not to get into a policy debate, but when we talk about like that competitive nature of school, whether it be academically or athletically, how do we balance that out when, if kids are allowed to move freely from school to school, eventually, inevitably, you're taking resources out of one school and sort of putting it into another, or putting it into a charter school or homeschool, everything like that?
Well, if you got an athletic program that has a stellar culture, you may not have a winning season that year, but you've got the culture that the kids are very loyal to that program. You're going to keep those kids even if they're getting pulled, if somebody else is trying to pull them, which we know has happened here at West Virginia for years and years and years. Recruiting's not new.
Not a new concept.
So what I did an interview with one of the statewide radio shows on this earlier, and my comment is get better. Create a culture in your school that attracts and keeps students, and you'll start to get victories. And so what I don't think we should be doing is having a knee-jerk reaction one season after the transfer rule goes into place, especially when you have the teams that, I'm in the Valley, and I really don't want to diss the teams that really had, some terrible
facts
defeats.
Are facts.
It wasn't like they weren't championship teams the year before either, or even for several years before that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing the culture, the lack of culture, and for me, I guess my question is, okay, there's an academic side here and there's an athletic side. So in most cases the cases that I'm talking about specifically the sports side of that. So me, you, and Hollis, we all go to one school. Forget the culture, skill set, we're winning. So there isn't a culture. So we're not building a culture there. We're out talenting the rest of the teams in the conference. So I don't think that you don't build culture by getting the best players and putting them on the same team and saying, okay, now there's a culture there of winning. Because the culture isn't about winning. The culture is about building young men and young women through the idea and the concept of what sports and teamwork is all about, to the point of what you do and working with other people, being able to work with other people, even if that particular project that you're working on fails, everybody's working on it together. But if the best person goes out, says, because over there where Hollis works, they're being very successful at it. So I want to go over there with Hollis and be part with Hollis. And so now that's going to make me better. For me being a guy, and I'm just a sports guy, so I don't have you guys' background, but for me, I don't see it that I don't understand how culture is built by me transferring to another team. The culture that a losing team may have between the coach and the players may be something that hasn't shown up yet. But if you take my quarterback, I'm done. I've got to redo this whole thing. And all Hollis needs is a quarterback, and he's got 3 or 4 receivers that are great. He's got a good offensive line. So he's just looking for a quarterback. He gets my quarterback. Did they build culture?
Well, you're talking about recruiting now. You're not talking about transfer rule. So he could have come chasing your quarterback, and we know that. That's the way it's been historically anyway.
But we do know. We can act like we don't, but we do know that there's recruiting.
Yeah, so that's what you're saying. Is say he's coming after your quarterback. What you're saying is he's coming to recruit your quarterback.
Yes.
So,
but where
if you have that culture there, this is what I'm getting at. If you have a culture that attracts and keeps students, whether it's for academics or whether it's for sports, and that student and those parents of that student, your quarterback, think, I want my kid there because they're developing young men into what I want my young man to be. You keep your kid, and it doesn't matter how hard Hollis records your.
I don't know. I agree with you. I agree with you because I don't know if, and it was part of what we were talking about earlier. Yeah. I don't know if the parent understands the significance of being part of a team and being loyal to the team. I don't know if they know that.
We don't, but it's not our place to decide. It's the parents' place to decide for their child. So if the parent's making decisions on bad information, that's on the parent.
Mm. Let me throw this in there too, kind of taking it a little bit off subject of what you guys were just talking about. I look at it not only from that, because I think you have some valid points, because it's hard to build a culture when my players keep getting distracted. Although I do acknowledge that a culture, I think South Charleston, for example, football-wise, they had a tough season, but I think Coach Ressler is building a culture there. He's trying to. It's going to take a couple years. It ain't going to happen overnight.
Yeah, it always does.
Yeah. So when we talk about being able to build this culture, building a culture comes with resources, or part of doing that has to be resources. So the idea that our coaches, and again, I know we got budgetary things going on and we can't afford a whole lot, but is there a pathway where we can, number one, provide our coaching and our coaching staff, particularly in football, with more resources, maybe a little bit of a higher salary, and allow our school administrators more flexibility when it comes to who they're going to hire and different things of that nature?
Well, first of all, I would want to push back a little bit on you, Hollis, on that the resources. I would acknowledge that they play a part, but yes. I don't think they are the most important part. I think that a lot of times when a coach or a leader comes into a program, you can have a program scarce on resources, but you get that right coach, they'll develop the team that creates that winning culture that we're all chasing as any team that you're on. And you can see that with smaller schools that have had put 20, 30 kids on the roster, but they're still and have a complete winning season, not a lost game. Yeah. We've seen that in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And those same schools do not have those resources. What they've got a coach who can go and hold a team together and coach well. Mm-hmm. And when you have that, you'll attract and keep those students. And so what I would advise before you get into the resource side of things, if schools are saying, okay, how do we get there to where we're not having our kids recruited away from us? There's a couple thoughts I have on that. One is that a principal, board of education, whoever's involved in a coach hiring process, they need to have some thought about really who they're putting at the coach, rather than who's their best friend that could get a job here coaching. Mm. So, that's one thing, and I think that you'll start to see when you get people stepping up, wanting to coach at higher levels, when you create that level of competition where you've got really stellar talent that you could have on a team. You also have the desire, or you should have, if you're a principal and you're worried about losing students out of your school, that you're going to really be mindful of who you put out coaching any of your sports teams. Yeah. The resource side of it, I think, comes sometimes. Yeah. You'll see parent-teacher organizations that get involved to raise those resources, because I've also seen that with coaches. You'll have coaches who are incredible fundraisers. They go out and they beat the bushes for those funds. And they come. And then you'll have others who never ask the first person, and they can complain they don't have anything. Yeah. It's culture. It's who you put at the head of the ship.
Okay, speaking of that, I'm glad you went there, because, and again, I know that, I was a coach for the WVSSAC, everything like that. So I know you have to have those, continual education credits and different things of that nature. But as far as that is concerned, do you think, as far as what you just mentioned, understanding how to fundraise, understanding the new generation of players, should we at least implement more requirements for continual education on subjects that may be not traditional when we think of coaching?
Give me an example.
Like you just said, like understanding fundraising, understanding social media, different things of that nature.
I think it's wise for a coach to get to understand those, and I think in a lot of circumstances the coach could do that on their own. I don't know about the requirement. It's just, I'm in business, a couple different businesses I mentioned. Yeah. So some of those professions, for me to hold a license, has requirements around that continuing education. For me to be successful in that business is on me. Yeah. So you're talking minimum standards versus what's it take for me to be out there and be the coach that gets those resources over the next coach that I got those kids here. So I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's what a coach should step up and do.
Okay, so let's stay with South Charleston. And I'll make the case that what I know that I left Coach Wrestler at South Charleston was because of kids leaving. Even before I got there, most of the players that I lost happened before we even got to the season. Primarily because my thoughts were discipline, culture, all of those kinds of things. So now, Coach Wrestler at South Charleston, he's left with young kids, had a tough season, likely going to have another tough season. It's more likely you have to put that on me before you have to put that on him. Because when you walk into a situation, no coach is going to be guaranteed. So, because to your point that you're making is this is about the coach. Tom Brady leaves Belichick. We were just talking about that.
That was about Brady.
Okay, so Brady and Belichick. Now the question is, does Brady make Belichick? Belichick make Brady? And so when you start to, I don't know anything but football teams, right? Basketball teams. That's all I know. So I get to claim the expertise in that particular area. So it's easy to sit back and say create culture, and it's about the coach. Mm-hmm. You can't coach if you don't have the skill set. I go to West Virginia State, and they don't even have they don't have one single full scholarship. Not one. By the time that I left, we had 20-something. Not because they gave them to me, because I did the work to get them. Nobody's saying, oh, Carl Lee was a great coach. He did a whole lot of stuff for West Virginia State. Nobody's going to say that. I'm not going to get any credit for that. I don't want any credit for that. I don't need any credit for that.
Did the scholarships help you build your team?
Absolutely.
And what coach was not doing that didn't have the team you had for not having put the work you did?
It wasn't even about them. I had to go fundraise. I had to do all that. I get that. But even at that, I couldn't compete with what Shepherd had. I couldn't go compete with basically almost anybody in the conference. I couldn't compete, but at least I could get a young man, a full scholarship, and he can get a college degree.
And I think the thing is like, no matter what, like, as far as culture you build, if you don't have the Jimmies and Johns, you ain't going to win ball games.
No matter what the coach is.
And if you're not winning ball games, I would conjecture that it's hard to build a culture.
See, and I say it needs to be about the Jimmies and Johns. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to say if you need the Jimmies and Johns, then the Jimmies and Johns need to have the best opportunity that they see for them. So if I'm a parent and I've got a great Jimmy, he's a quarterback that I know he's got a chance to go into NCAA and maybe he's playing Division I.
Yeah.
I'm going to want to find the environment who gives him the best shot at that. And so as a parent, if that choice is available, should I not make that choice for my young quarterback?
I mean, it's hard for me to argue with that. Like I said, and this is where I've been the whole year on this. I've been on your side of the fence, no doubt about it. But again, I think what I've understand is that the problems go deeper. And that's why I mentioned resources. When you look at a school like Capitol High, they're dealing with systemic issues. They're dealing with resources. They don't have a fund. They're dealing with a whole host of issues that makes it more difficult than, let's say, a GW to build a culture. So I just don't think that part can be left out of it.
Yeah, and what we've done, I don't necessarily is the end all and be all for what happens in West Virginia athletics.
Of course not.
This just happened. I mean, we're talking about 2023 session.
Yeah.
That this goes through, and then you see a season come in right afterwards, and you see the blowouts, and the first thing you can say, well, it's due to the transfer rule. But nobody goes back and looks at how many of these kids actually transferred to these teams had the blowouts. Yeah. I can tell you on a lot of them, it was almost none, but the blowout still happened. Yeah. So you can't just go point your finger at the transfer rule. Do more things need to happen in order to improve West Virginia athletics and high school sports? I'm not saying they don't.
So,
But I'm saying that you got to let this play out a little bit and let people start chasing that culture that attracts and keeps students, not just their school, but in West Virginia, frankly, along our borders.
And I think part of the knee-jerk reaction was that you have those traditional powers, Capitol High, South Charleston, looking this bad. I don't think we've ever seen schools in this area ever look this bad. And that, that may be part of your point. So I'll give you that one.
well, see, and my thing is someone else is benefiting from those kids. Somebody else is building a culture around kids from these teams that have been good. And everybody knows teams go up and down and up and down.
100%.
And South Charleston had lost six out of the last 7 games when I came in prior to. And then losing primarily the top 5, 6 guys, the guys who were going to make a difference, all of those guys leave.
Yeah.
They weren't interested. And again, I'm not mad at them. They did what they were allowed to do. What bothers me is the guys that are left who weren't quite ready yet. What I see that we're teaching is it is individualized. And we're trying to either place the blame or not try to. We're basically going to say the blame goes with the coach because he can't create the culture. To create culture, you got to have consistency. In order to have consistency, you need the same individuals getting the same information every day. Like I can't walk down the hall and tell that guy, no, you got to go get back into class. So all of a sudden, my team has a culture of being in class. Hollis can verify this. You miss class, I get any information, you have a bad grade, you got money, that money's coming back to me. That was the culture. You knew it was here's the rule, here's the consequence. There was no in between. You either did it or you didn't. That created a culture.
So you're saying like inconsistency can't create a culture?
I'm just saying that if
inconsistency of players moving around.
No, you can't can't create that culture because whether I create a culture because I come to you, but I've taken a culture, I've broken the culture.
You're also looking. You're
are.
responding to 1 year though. So you have one. What if it's the same situation and you got all seniors that made up your line and they're gone? They graduated. It was you rocked all the way to that point and they're gone. You're rebuilding it the same thing too. And so this happened. A lot of things there coincidentally, I believe, at the same time this transfer rule was created. And so, yeah, you've got teams that have the blowouts, but you also, if you look back at the history of those teams, they probably weren't, the ones that got blown out weren't attracting those students in the first place because if you look historically, if just X's and O's and wins and losses, if that's all that attracts it, then those teams weren't attracting the players with their seasons as they were.
So let me ask similar point, other side. So you have those kids who are those D1 athletes and they're transferring into these other schools. And now what's happening is that they're taking positions from kids who have been in the program who have helped create the culture. So what would be the response to those parents to say, hey, my kid's been here since Little League. He's worked hard, but now he's second fiddle to this guy who just came in.
Yeah. And we hear those complaints. I think they're legitimate complaints, and I don't have a great answer for that. I really don't. Yeah. It's and you're not going to hear me come anywhere and say that this rule is perfect.
Okay.
Like any other rule in sports, frankly. You're not going to go in and find something that we could probably pick any one thing in high school sports and we can have a really good podcast over debating around should this be improved and why. And so are there things around the transfer rule at some point that maybe we want to address? Maybe so. But I don't think you do it in knee-jerk reaction until you see it play out.
So are you making the case that we're still in knee-jerk?
I think if we were to go back and reverse that to what it was, just after one season, then yes, I think it's knee-jerk.
See, I think it's kind of like the transfer portal in college, okay? When it first comes out, instantly it's a knee jerk because guys are testing it to get in it, right? So the same thing is true, I think, in high school, especially in the Valley. Not saying that some kids didn't leave in other cases, but the number of people and the number of guys that come from a team. And we can blame the culture of the school, or there's a whole lot of other situations that could take place. South Charleston players in Hurricane. Okay? The coach went there. Now you can say, oh, they followed the coach, which to me makes sense, right?
Yeah, happens in college.
Happens in college. Yeah. I want to follow that coach. So I have to allow these kids to go. And then I'm going to be the one who we're going to judge on building culture and being the head coach that's not winning. He's not building a culture. He's not winning. And because I know for a fact that my discipline was going to be a little bit more different than what it had been. And some of these kids did not want that.
Yeah, and if I'm a parent, I want that discipline for my kid. So that's where I want them to be, especially if they're a stellar player, because if they're just resting on their laurels with their talent. I want somebody who has that discipline because they probably need it more than the coach that just lets them just win on their talents instead of that discipline. So, that's to me, and maybe a parent that has another star player somewhere through there, when they start recognizing that, then maybe that parent's saying, I want my kid there because I know that the rules are clear-cut, and if you don't follow them, there's consequences. And my kid needs that.
All right, let's take a quick break here, and we'll be right back.
Contact Carl Lee on email. Let's talk carllee@gmail.com or text 409-422-7539.
You're listening to Let's Talk with Carl Lee. Sponsorship opportunities are available. Email letstalk@promessage.com or call 304-342-8131. For more information, visit WCHSnetwork.com/Let's Talk. Now, back to the conversation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've been bouncing around here on what we think is the valid path to or structure of what the transfer situation in high school should be, could be, what it is, what it isn't.
Let me jump in. Let me ask this. So in trying to find a middle ground to not necessarily appease everybody, but like I said, to stop the wild, wild west while still allowing kids and parents to have flexibility.
You have to define flexibility.
Yeah. I'm saying flexibility. You still have a pathway to transfer. You still have password. You have a choice, to put it in your words. Should there be something where maybe once you get in high school, you only get one transfer? Should there be something before you maybe have to sit out a season? Should there be something where you have to at least give your home school, your district school a chance, and then once you get there, you can transfer after your 9th grade year? Is there a balance somewhere? So it's not, as Coach Lee has stated previously, you're not letting the floodgates open on both sides where I'm not getting kids from my feeder school and I'm losing kids that I already have.
There very well may be. I don't have that answer, but what I do know is that with what we changed, I can say that probably a majority of at least the Senate, I can speak for the House, feels like we need to see how this plays out a little bit before we would go back and start tweaking when we don't know what we have yet.
So you're saying give it a little bit more time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so here's one of the here's maybe my major concern with the idea of knowing that we're not changing anything, we're staying in place with what we got. The issue that I have that I think is critical is the middle school kid who can go wherever he wants. Because now what you're doing is you're ripping off the top. Okay? You're taking all my juniors, upcoming seniors, you're taking them.
Well, just to put it in context, that's been the rule for a long time.
I understand. But in a combination,
Okay, gotcha.
in a combination. So now I'm sitting up there with 25, 27, 28, 30 kids, and I'm going to get nobody from middle school because I only won 3 games because they can go wherever they want. So they're not even going to come in and even touch me. So I'm losing them on both ends. And to me, if you're going to take the kids who are already there, you're going to allow them an exit. You can't then in turn allow the people who are feeding it to leave too.
I think you're working on the premise that when you're coming out of middle school into high school,
Yes.
that football is going to be the decision for where I let my child go. So, if I live in Hurricane or I live in Charleston,
Football or sports is let's don't be naive here, because 90+% of every kid who has transferred sports related only.
they may be the percentage of transfers, but not necessarily the percentage of students.
Okay, well,
So
but we only talk about the athletes that transfer.
No, yeah, what I'm talking about is if I'm a parent and I got my kid coming out of middle school, there's a percentage, and I absolutely agree with you, that football is going to be the deciding factor where they go to high school. You also got kids who are also still football players, but to what your point earlier about the loyalty to your program, you grow up into it, and by golly, you bleed whatever color your school is.
Yep.
Then you're still there. You're going to be going to that area where your family lives, where your dad went to school, where your brother went to school, where your sister's going to school. Even though football might be an incredibly important thing in your life, those students are still there to build those programs with.
There's not enough. Okay? I truly believe there's not enough of those students. My hat's off to them. Love them. Respect them. There's just not enough.
Yeah, I think that sentiment.
That's just not enough. There's just not enough of those there.
Yeah, I think that's been a passe. I
Yeah,
don't think that's
yeah.
now. Just because, and this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the transfer rule in itself. I just think because the culture of sports. I think when we look at youth on up to high school, it's a lot of moving parts within that. It's not like where you play for your community coming all the way up. We've seen kids,
Right.
live here on the east and the west side, and they're playing for teams out in Hurricane, Taze Valley, and whatever. We're talking about youth. So I think that sentiment, although I think it's true for some, I think that's sort of changing now.
Yeah, league and travel sports changed a lot.
Travel sports changed
I would
everything.
agree with
Yeah.
that. Yeah, they changed an awful lot of that. So should we stop doing travel sports?
I think so. I think if I had my way, not that we would stop doing it, but I think all youth sports would be under the WVSSAC or something similar. So that way we can put parameters, not necessarily even put parameters, so we can watch it, guide it, create policies and guidelines around it. So, we're not excluding kids, and we're making sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the kids and not the parents.
And that may be part of the things that I was talking about. This isn't the end-all and be-all
Gotcha.
for high school sports. So maybe that's another spot you have to look at is what else is causing all this, because it's not just transfer.
No,
It's clearly not. I don't think it is at all. I think it's what happens early.
Yeah, I think because we're fighting now in youth sports. My job with the city of South Charleston is I'm the youth director for youth sports, and kids leave, they go different places at the middle school level. I mean, at the youth level. And we're trying to create a situation to where that can't happen, because you're playing in your community, and I think, like.
Well, we specifically talking about like the AAUs and travel football and different things of that nature.
Okay. Well, let me just say this, and I want to be on record here when I say this. Okay. I want to be on record.
We'll hit the record button.
Yeah, hit the record button.
So we're recording live.
And I'm not going to convince anybody who plays travel football. I'm not going to convince anybody who coaches travel football. Travel football has an extremely dangerous situation every single time you play. Football, in its own right, does not play 3 games, 4 games in 2 days. We're seeing the physicality of the game, and that's not because grown men or college players, high school players hit harder. The brain itself, the skull itself, in the helmet, you can hit your head on the ground. brain slides. These facts I know because I've gone through this process. The fact that we don't govern travel football, we know, everybody knows. When I say everybody above the roof of it knows that it's dangerous. Every kid, any kid who actually would be a victim of travel football and football through the rest of their older years, maybe go to college. By the time they get out of college, they may have an issue. Yeah. Those coaches are gone.
And I think when you talk about the injury, it's not just a football thing.
No, it's not.
I think it's all sports because we're seeing kids young and younger develop tendonitis. Like if you're just kicking the soccer ball for 10 years of your youth, basketball, baseball, softball, we're seeing those ligament sort of issues come up earlier and earlier.
I think that we have to. Somebody has to say, wait. Let's think about what's happening in travel football and the number of games that they play. They play one game in a weekend, like everybody else, and that doesn't make you safe. But if you're going to play 3 games, and I get it that the clock runs. The clock runs, so you're thinking that that's better. It's one hit. It's one time to hit your head against the ground.
Well, and that's what my point was. I think if we had a governing body, I think you could implement travel sports into our youth sports. So that way, instead of you just playing against the teams in your county or a couple counties, we could create a team or a division, and that team or division can play within season, a 12, 10-game season, and you play against teams from Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. You could travel just within a season. You can still get your travel ball field, but like you said, you're not playing, 20, 30, 40, 50 games in the spring, which is ridiculous.
And I don't know how we sit by and allow that. I'm the biggest critic of it.
In travel football, you guys are going to be way more educated on that than I am, because I've never so much as watched a travel football games, because the sport that I've been around the most is probably basketball. But I've been around a lot of prep teams in basketball, and I've done travel teams and all that kind of stuff and seen it. So and I know that year-round pounding of the exact same sport wears on a young body. It just does.
Well, mine is not even the body. The body, if you play football, you're gonna, I had some X-rays. I got arthritis, shoulders, back, neck, all that. But my thing with football, and at any age, we're just allowing it to be too much.
Yeah, but I think to Senator's point, don't limit it to just. I think travel sports.
Okay,
I understand football obviously because you have the brain and everything like that, but travel sports are an issue, which I think all travel sports need to have a governing body within said state or region.
I don't even know. Go ahead.
And that's where I think we were talking about Hollis a minute ago, is where we were going, is just it's undermined that sense of community that you have, that you apply from your sport to whatever that community is. And so when you're getting these travel leagues, and the new norm is that sports aren't built around community, which they really aren't with travel, because you go so 100%. Broadly, you undermine that community sensation that for those kids that are coming up and saying, I'm going to play here because this is where my family's been, this is where we live, and this is my community, gets undermined some. And that's what, to the point you were talking about a second ago, is that it's harder and harder to keep those kids.
Right.
Well, that's not just a travel or just not just a transfer rule issue. And that's the point I was making.
Yeah, and 100%. And I think that, just to even find a solution to that, I think you could keep those travel sports within a county context, and you could play still. You could still have that travel ball feel, whatever, basketball, whatever. Just if we can, sort of bounded within that county, we could still have some sentiments or some feel of a community type of thing without it being just a free-for-all. We had a governing
you probably
body.
have more resources toward your sports in that community as well, because parents are dumping a ton of cash on those.
And all parents are.
Absolutely, yeah.
And really, and I've seen that too. Is like all parents wouldn't. I've seen parents that live in very socioeconomic deprived communities dump tons of money in sports. Same ones that live in middle class and upper middle class.
And I'll say this, and I don't think when you start talking about travel football, until you start talking about a high school, some form of a high school travel football, you ain't getting a college. You're not getting college scouts coming to see a 9-year-old.
Well, I don't think that's the point now.
Well,
I
it
think
may not be.
I think the point is just because, again, if we look at Canal Valley, just how youth sports have broken down totally, and I'm thinking those parents are like, I want to play against other than these same 5 teams or 4 teams I'm playing against. So I think it depends on your community that you're coming from, and that will kind of lead your choices.
Well, and I think part of the reason that youth football is an issue is because, which is something that I personally think we need, is a governing body, outside of the coaches. Because, again, coaches are going to always settle for what's best for them.
Yeah.
Right.
The rule that I want this year, I didn't need it last year.
Yeah.
I need you to change
truth
the
in this
birthday.
statement.
Yeah. My kid's in that birthday window where he can stay down, to the C team. Let's change that rule.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a legitimate thing that's happening now just in youth basketball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you this, Senator Tarr, before we get out of here. Speaking of that, the WVSSSC has opened up the bidding for the state championship games to be, I think we got bids from Charleston, Bluefield, WVU, Marshall. Where would be your preference to see that game at?
Marshall is closest to the house.
Marshall, I mean, it would be rotated between Marshall and WVU. I think they have a joint bid together.
Yeah.
So
And there's other reasons there too. If you talk to anybody that's in football across the state and you talk about who they want to go see, they're going to go see Marshall or WVU, even though those teams aren't competitive. As we're talking about competition.
Right.
People want to see that game,
Right?
So I think getting to play on those fields is a big deal.
I 100% agree.
And I think,
100%.
and what I like about it is, I like the idea of the introduction of what Marshall and WVU looks like.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these kids have never really seen it. And
certainly ain't played on it.
Yeah, it hadn't played on it. So all of a sudden, if you got a chance to, because I can remember playing at Lately Field for the first time.
Yeah.
Your perspective changes.
Oh my gosh. I was like, this must be somewhere special.
And it puts us in line with the other states. Every other state, their championship games are either at their premier college or NFL or pro sports stadiums.
Yeah.
So when we talk about economic development and being a little bit more attractive, yes, it's a very, very, very minute, small thing, but I think it is a thing.
Oh, it absolutely is a thing.
Yeah.
And it's getting back to that culture thing, too. If you're going to if that's what you're chasing, you're going to get to play on that field.
Yeah.
There's something there to work for.
I think so, too. That's a great point.
Is there a place for mutual conversation outside of a governing body, but into, I'll say public, but not necessarily the wide open public, but having conversations with people who are involved into these sports.
In travel sports, is that what you're talking about?
Whether it be travel sports or, because obviously to make a decision on travel sports, if you talk to a coach that's on travel, he's going to sell you on all the good that it is. You talk to me, I'm going to tell you the risk. It might be great. My concern with travel football is simple. It's the danger of the collision, the head contact, whether it's practice, whether it's games. You can't play 4 games in a weekend. 2 games, 3 games back to back. You can't. I can't even fathom it. But I'm just, one of the concerns that I have is like, there ought to be like, I don't know if it's like, I can't talk to nothing that you guys do. I got no chance at any description of it or any idea. And not making the case that I'm that guy that should be part of that board. I'm just making the case that I think how the public feels, how people who have been in the sports, like my job is youth sports. So people who are in those kinds of things who have different opinions, I think they're valuable assets to some of the questions and some of the conversations that you guys may have. Would that ever be anything possible?
Oh, yeah. The discussion's possible. And we have those entities that are there now. What comes to my mind as you're speaking is, first of all, is boxing. And the reason there is a board around boxing and the officiating is the safety aspect of it. You know, so same thing with Ultimate Fighting. You know, here in West Virginia, there's regulation that was created anew for that when it was established, and even the SSAC to some extent it's safety. It's not. There's other things around the SSAC, but part of it is safety. And sometimes I think that's lost in some of the regulations that they put through there. But those discussions are up and around for any kind of sporting activity where we have an athlete involved that is placing themselves at risk to play their sport. So if something like that is needed, it's not something that's ever been brought to me. This is the first time anybody's ever talked to me about you know, putting regulation around any sort of thing that has to do with travel sports. So I'm not educated enough to know, is this something that is a good idea or a bad idea? But it's, you know, we're a couple blocks away from the place where the discussions happen, you know. So,
Right.
And it's a matter usually when those ideas are brought to us is that here's a problem that we need solved. And here's my idea for helping solve it. So how do I turn my idea into something that actually matters?
You might get your first piece of legislation.
There you go.
Coach Lee.
Well, again, I for everybody who coaches and is listening, because I'm sure there's a ton of coaches that are listening to me say this. I'm not blaming you on what you're doing. I'm just telling you the reality of the sport. And the facts are that you can't play football 3 and 4 times. I don't care how fast you run the clock. It's the contact. It's not how long the game is. It's not how big the guy is. Kid, how many times is his head going to hit the ground? How many times is his head going to hit the next guy? That is what it is.
Yeah.
You can't count that. And I want to make the case that we have to do. Basketball's fine. Travel basketball, you know, there's not a whole lot of risk other than just basic.
I would argue.
Well,
I would
I'm
different.
just gonna say normal injuries, you know, knees and stuff like that. You die from CTE.
Okay. Well,
You see what I'm saying? Like you that there's no place for, you know, this is something that you die from. And if you're not aware of it, and I'm sure none of these coaches are aware of it or think, oh, this is not going to happen. Trust me.
Oh yeah, that science is still new relative to for the neurology around that and the studies and the rehab and all that kind of stuff. It's all relatively new.
And when you talk about rehab, that's still a long way off, you know. And God forbid, I would never want to be part of coaching someone who has that or ends up getting that.
And maybe, I'm asking, are you aware of studies out there that show that when you have a travel football player who's also playing high school sports, and so they're doing this very long, that they have a higher incidence of CTE than?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's the contact. It's the rapid contact that you have. Football is seasonal, and once the season's done, you're done. And so now let's just say you got a 16-week season in college football or in pro ball, and maybe playoffs, and then all the practices and training camp and all that kind of stuff. Now imagine practicing, and even if you do light practice, okay, you're going to play 4 games, maybe 2 or 3 in the same day with contact.
Sure. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. As you get fatigued, you're more likely susceptible to injury, and in this game, head injuries are common. So.
Football was not ever meant to be a travel sport, and until somebody steps in and does something with it, I think we're putting the future.
Do you know if there's any states who do that, have regulated travel football?
I seriously doubt it, because I don't think it's a concern, because nobody's thinking about the future, which is the same exact thing back in the day. If Hollis got hit in football.
Well, there is one state. And I sent you this the other day. Again, it's a bill that's being written now, or it's being proposed or introduced, I should say. California is introduced a bill that could possibly just end youth tackle football. So there's one state, I think, that I'm aware of that's trying to deal with this.
Okay, so in order to get there, they've had to have some research or some bodies that have done research around the reasons for why they're going that direction.
Yeah.
So it's a place to start looking to bring something to the Capitol or to your legislator or to whoever you're wanting to work with that says, this is a problem. I'm worried about the kids in West Virginia if we don't address it. So, and that kind of stuff comes up. I mean, we handle 3,000 bills a year up there, and we end up passing a little under 300.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a mill when you come up there to try to get your bill to get competition to be seen and heard. But doing some research along somebody that's already been down that path certainly doesn't hurt.
Okay. Well, Senator, it was great to have you on, and
Well, thanks for having me.
And I do still think that we haven't really solved our our situation here yet. But I think that for me, I'm happy if we're talking about it, because I think to the point, I think you're wanting the same thing that everybody else is saying is culture, you know, and all of that kind of thing. And we just, and for the first time now, we actually have to face what is culture.
That's a good question.
You know, what is actually culture?
Yeah.
And can we say we're not worried about winning? Because then we're going to fire the coach when he's not winning. So all of these kinds of questions still come up that you have to, you kind of have to try to figure out.
Well, you can't build a culture without winning eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to, may not championship, but you have to win a little bit. You got to win something.
If you can get to, because again, what defines winning? Is that a championship or is that a successful season? I looked at it. I gave up on the administration at state, and I looked at it as, if I can get my kids to play, my young men to play and play hard, I don't care if we win or lose, and they graduate, I'm good.
Nah, you got to win on the field.
You know, but I get it.
Yeah,
well, I got fired though.
Yeah, you got to win on the field.
And I get that. But if you ain't giving me the funds,
but he just like Senator Tarr said, you don't need the money.
Gotta go beat the bushes, man. Gotta beat the bushes.
Look, I'm the one who
Chase down those grads making the money now.
There you go.
Listen, if I could get to, if I'm the one who created the first football scholarship possibility. So, and the weight room.
So you needed more time. That's all.
No, I don't even think it was more or less even more time. I just think that the most important thing is for you to graduate. I'm prouder of where you are now compared to what you did in football.
Yeah, but you got to win. You know
I get it. Oh, I do. Yeah. I get it. But I'm just saying, there's a juncture where we have to try to figure out where these ends are.
Yeah.
Like, what is winning? We have to because we may have to redefine winning.
I think no, I don't necessarily think you have to redefine winning. I think that when you go in and you start building a program, if you're building a program from scratch, and you get that loyalty from your school, from your community, and from those kids, they're going to go through hell and high water for you in that position if you've built that culture. And the parents, if you've got the relationship with the parents, they're probably going to have that belief in you too to stick with you to go in. And that's how you build to those, putting those W's on the board.
I made a comment today on Facebook about one of the things that's interesting to me is, okay, so let's just say I had built this culture that was preparing to win. Coach Moreau ends up coming in and wins. He was on my staff, and I'm not taking any credit for his wins. But I think that at some point, the administration has to be able to look into what it is. And then what happens is you get this new administration. This new administration is like, okay, well, this is his history. He ain't won any games this long. So I'm coming in. We got to get rid of him and get somebody else. So all that culture that I built, all that fundraising, all the weight room, all the stuff that I got, that new administration, what have you done for me lately? I'm just looking at the facts. The facts say that you're not winning and you got to go.
That's not abnormal.
No, it's not.
Yeah, that happens well before this transfer rules ever came. I mean, that's been here for a long time.
Yeah, I'm not blaming that. I'm not blaming that, but I'm just making the case that that's not. I don't necessarily think that's the way that you can judge it, but I know that's how it's always going to be judged because every time a new coach comes in or a new administration comes in,
they're looking at your record.
They're looking at your record. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and that comes back to those administrations going in and being very careful on who they're choosing to coach relative to what they're expecting for that program.
Yeah.
And I think across the state, by and large, you got some of those that do it exceptionally well, but you got some that I don't think can pay attention to it. It's just who's willing to stick their hand up in the air and say, "I'll coach." Right. And those you create problems there.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be back with you next week. We are gone.
The opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of WVRC Media, its management, employees, or sponsors. Contact Carl Lee on email, letstalkcarllee@gmail.com, or text 409-422-7539.